Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. So this will probably be kind of short because I just finished watching this with my friends. I'm a bit sleepy right now and got kind of a long day tomorrow, but I thought I'd talk about this movie a little bit. It's kind of interesting because I think I had this on like VHS or something when I was a kid. I remember watching this when I was like really little, where I barely remembered anything about this movie. To the point where I actually remembered a lot of things wrong. And I guess one of my parents probably gave the VHS away, and I hadn't seen the movie since. And then my friends were like, hey, we're going to watch Dragonheart. And I kind of remembered it off the title, and I was interested. In my head, for some reason, I remembered this movie as being kind of serious or whatever. And then we started watching it, and it's an action movie, but a lot of it is just like a comedy or very comedic. It's kind of weird, and then after a certain point it kind of just becomes a bit more serious. And it was interesting, my friends and I having different opinions on this movie, where most of the people in my friend group were saying like they liked the parts that were more comedic, specifically the developing friendship between the knight and the dragon. And then for me, I liked the parts where it was more of the fighting stuff, and I didn't really care for the parts with the dragon as much, so we were kind of just on opposite ends with that. And we were making a lot of jokes with this movie, which was kind of fun. That's like the fun thing with watching movies with friends. Like one of my friends was saying that this movie was basically just doomed happy. After a certain point, we just kept talking about that as the movie went on, because there's this whole concept, and it's only kind of the basic concept of this movie that I remembered, that there's this dragon. Oh yeah, the dragon's voiced by Sean Connery, which is kind of funny. I have like a comment about that, but I'll get to that in a minute. Where there's this like prince that's dying, and his mother and I think his mentor or something, who's like the knight character, I think that's the one that's played by Dennis Quaid, tells this dragon, who's like the last of the dragons or something, like, hey, we need to save this kid's life, you gotta help with that. And the dragon gives up half of his heart. And that was the only thing I really remembered about the movie, of that they're connected permanently, where like if one of them gets injured in a spot, the other one also gets injured in a spot. So it ends up being this thing where like if one of them dies, the other one dies. And I find that a really interesting concept, and I wish the movie did more with that. It felt like it only kind of did stuff with it at the end, where it turns out that the prince has actually just been like an asshole the whole time, and his mentor never like realized it, or his family or anything. So it ends up boiling down at the end of like a bunch of the characters like are trying to kill the prince, and they're not really able to do it, so they want to kill the dragon instead. And the prince is like aware of their literal like heart connection or whatever, and is trying to get them to not kill the dragon, but like in a way to save his own life, basically. And I thought that was pretty interesting towards the end of the movie. Or they have this one part early on where the dragon, or no, the prince gets injured in the shoulder and the dragon gets injured in the shoulder. But other than those kind of parts, it felt like they didn't really do much with that. I don't know, I just find it a really interesting concept. Maybe there's more to it with the sequels, because someone in the group brought up that there's like DVD, like direct to DVD sequels, which are usually kind of like with a lot of things. So I don't plan to watch those. I don't know if the group wants to watch that eventually. I'll probably sit out with that. I don't know if I'd want to watch this movie again, actually. It was kind of nice to see in that it's one of those, like I said, I vaguely remembered from when I was little, so I was kind of curious to see, like, has my opinion on it changed? And it turns out I kind of misremembered the whole thing anyway. Hold on, let me look at my notes, actually, because I did kind of write notes for this. I do like the scene where the dragon does give up his heart and everything to the boy. I thought it was kind of interesting. It's like the first time the dragon's introduced in the story, and it felt dramatic to me because you don't really see the dragon until the end of the scene, and I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. Or there's parts, where the dragon is like kind of hidden in shadow towards the beginning of the movie, where it's like you can only see a little bit of its features. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I thought, oh, okay, they're making it so you're not able to like see the dragon, where the characters are just sort of talking in the dragon's direction. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. And then you see the dragon, you're like, oh, okay, there's a reason for that. This movie's from 1996. The CGI for the dragon doesn't really look good. I feel like they did this in a way where they wanted to show the dragon on screen like as little as possible, so they were kind of trying to cut corners of that. I do think it makes it more interesting that way. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the only reason of the characters looking in the direction of the dragon, but us, the viewer, not being able to see the dragon, especially because the dragon, you know, it's like massive compared to everyone else. So I feel like that kind of camera choice makes it interesting, but I'm also like, okay, how much of this is because of the budget? Or there's this one part where the knight character towards the beginning is being dragged on a rope that's like tied around the dragon, and the dragon's in the air flying, but then what we're seeing is just the guy being dragged around on the ground or something, is like another way of like, okay, you can't see the dragon and stuff. It's also funny to me that the dragon's name is Draco, by the way. He ends up getting a name like pretty early on in the movie, which I find funny, where Draco points it out of like, oh, you're just calling me dragon in a different language, after getting mad at one of the characters for like constantly calling him dragon. But yeah, Draco is voiced by Sean Connery, which makes it really funny at the scenes when like the human characters are looking and talking at Draco and stuff, where you're just hearing Sean Connery's voice in response. So in my head, as I'm watching this, even though I know they're talking to a dragon, I'm just thinking of it as like Sean Connery himself is there, but like off screen, and that's who they're talking to. Having the mindset just kind of made the movie funnier to me. But yeah, I didn't remember that, as there's like a little bit of a time, no, I think it's like a 12-year time skip or something like that, where the prince is like, I think, an adult at this point or something, or not as young. And the knight and the dragon are kind of interesting, where it's like the knight, who was the prince's mentor, originally wants to kill the dragon because he thinks that's basically the reason why the prince has kind of grown up into an asshole, even though that's not it. That's just actually the prince's personality. So he wants to kill this specific dragon, and they end up meeting each other, and they have this really long conversation where the knight is like, yeah, I'm trying to find the specific dragon, and the dragon's like, oh, that's actually me, and they get into like an argument. They get into a lot of like Tom and Jerry type of situations at the beginning, where they're trying to fight each other, and it ends up being a stalemate. They literally have this one joke where the knight is inside of the dragon's mouth with his sword pointing up, where it would like stab the dragon's brain, and the dragon's ready to chomp down, and they literally show a bit where it's like it goes from like daytime to nighttime or something, and it's just kind of goofy, where they're just failing to kill each other. And this goes on for a while. This goes on for like 20 minutes or something, and it's like supposed to be very comedic. Like, for some reason, I thought this movie, I guess because the whole like, oh, the dragon and the prince share a heart thing, I thought that meant the prince was going to be the main character, and then it turns out the prince is actually the villain. And after a certain point in the movie, it's like everyone's actually trying to just kill him, and the prince isn't even really in the movie that much anyway. The main characters really are just the dragon and the knight. I think his name is Bowen. And it's a lot of them together, and it kind of becomes like Shark Tale, where they're having to do fake fights, like staged fights, to earn money and stuff. They kind of argue like an old married couple at a certain point, which was kind of funny. And then there's this woman, her name's Kara, and she accidentally gets the prince. I kind of forgot about her after a while. The prince injured at the beginning of the movie, which causes him to need what I'm gonna call like the Dragonheart transplant, basically. And then she ends up kind of joining their team, where the prince had killed her father, and she wants revenge. So she's there too, but it's mostly, and also ends up befriending the dragon, but it's mostly like the knight and the dragon, pretty much. I feel like I kind of just zoned out after a while. Like, I was paying attention to a lot of the, like, dragon and knight comedy bits, as I'll call it, at the beginning. I feel like I blinked, and then all of a sudden it's like there's now this huge battle going on, and I was like, okay, this is sort of interesting. And then it got to a point towards the end where there's like 20 minutes left or something, and everyone's trying to kill the prince, and they're trying to sneak into the castle. And then at that point I was like fully like invested, but also like actually interested in what was going on. So it's kind of a bummer for me. I was only really interested in like the end of this movie. Like, there's this one scene I liked where the prince's mom is ready to kill the dragon, so that her son would die, because she knows that he is like mistreating the peasants and stuff, and like needs to be taken out of power basically, and she's gonna do that by having him killed. And she tells the dragon, she feels bad of trying to kill the dragon in order to kill her son, and she tells her son like, oh, I'm correcting a mistake I've made in the past, where she was the one that originally like begged the dragon to save her son, and then her son kills her, but it's not like on screen. It actually, I think, makes it kind of like scarier, where the son, you see, goes into this like doorway or something with like a sword, and I think his mom goes in there too, and you just hear her screaming, and then it cuts to someone else. I mean, you know, at that point that he's killed her, but I think that made it more kind of threatening rather than just showing him like stabbing her on screen or something. And then the knight and Draco, they end up getting into this argument or whatever of like, oh, you have to kill me in order to kill the prince and stuff, and Draco tries to fight the knight, or like forces him to fight, and he refuses because they're like friends now and stuff, but it's all just like a way to get the dragon to die basically. But then they have this thing that's sort of nice at the end, where throughout the movie Draco's mentioning of like the other dragons. I guess the dragons have this backstory of like they become part of this constellation they become stars when they die that looks like a constellation in the shape of a dragon or something, but not every dragon gets to become part of the constellation. It's like only the ones that do a good deed or whatever, but then when the dragon dies at the end of the movie, he becomes part of the constellation. And they make it this kind of like slightly drawn out thing where he, like, all the stars start merging together into like one big star, and then it like explodes, and then it turns back into a constellation of a dragon. It was kind of a bit confusing, but I guess it means the good deed of sacrificing himself so that the prince would die, you know, earned him a place in like dragon heaven basically. But the thing that's weird to me, and I haven't looked up the plot of the sequels, and they're direct to DVD sequels anyway, usually those aren't good, is that like Draco dies at the end of this movie and the kingdom is saved. There's no more dragons because he's the last dragon. So then how are you gonna make a sequel if it's a movie about dragons, unless it's like it turns out there's more dragons, or we're following this like knight character still, which I didn't mind. I thought he was okay as like a protagonist and stuff. But yeah, this movie was okay. I feel like in my brain, since I watched it when I was really small, I like hyped it up for more than it actually was, and then when I saw that most of it was like comedic, I felt disappointed. Like my friends and I had this big conversation about it at the end of the movie. I gave some of my thoughts, which is some of the stuff I said at the beginning of like I liked the fighting stuff and not really the stuff with the dragon. But yeah, I feel we were talking about how like the movie should just kind of pick a lane of like, is it going to be more action stuff? Is it going to be more comedic? We had the general agreement of the movie should have leaned more into the comedic stuff and been, yeah, just more of like a comedy action movie. And it probably would have been more memorable that way, because it kind of felt like that towards the beginning. And even though I didn't really care for those parts that much, it's like I was at least paying attention at that point. As the stuff of them trying to kill the prince is, as we were saying, kind of like a bit generic, really. And yeah, I thought the movie was okay. I feel like the thing I'm disappointed about is the concept of like sharing your heart with someone where you're connected forever, not in a romantic way, but in like a literal way, is how it's done in this movie. It's just so cool to me, and they don't really do anything with it. And I'm just like, dang, that's like the one thing I'd remembered about the movie and was kind of curious to see again. But I didn't mind watching it. You know, it was fun to watch with friends, and sometimes with movies, not really like with one, sometimes with ones that are bad, but also with ones that we think are kind of just okay, or we're not all as like focused and stuff. And it's funny, it's not just me that like sometimes just kind of zones out or it's not really following with the plot. Sometimes it's other people in the group too, which is really nice because there's always one specific person who will like recap for us of like what's going on during the movie, because I'm one of those people as well in the group that kind of just will sometimes zone out and not fully pay attention to what's going on and stuff. But even for movies that are just okay, we'll make like jokes. Well, not usually me, it's usually other people in the group, and I'm just kind of listening and laughing along of like jokes about things in the movie. Hold on, let me check our Discord actually to see if there was anything else that was kind of funny in there, because we talked about the dragon not having good CGI, and the dragon and the knight and their whole relationship and everything, and the prince being an asshole. Yeah, the words Doomsday Howie is mentioned here so many times. I even asked in the group, I was like, can I quote you guys on this? And they're like, yeah. But that's the best way I can describe this movie. But yeah, it was fun as an experience, but I don't think I'm gonna rewatch this again at some point. But cool to see now that I'm older, at least once. Okay, I'm getting a bit sleepy, sorry. But yeah, I went through all my notes already. I don't know if I could recommend this or not. If you've never seen it, I'd say, yeah, give it a shot. If you have, I'd say it's up to you to rewatch it, honestly. Not that it's a bad movie, I just think it's okay. I don't think it deserved to have sequels. I don't think it really needed one. I feel like it wrapped itself up. But whatever. Alright, thanks for watching. Bye bye.